Okay, I believe we are now live. It is currently, if you are watching this right now, it is 10 o'clock a.m. Central Time, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. And I am Frank. I am the co-founder of the Ohm Store, and we are here with Dr. Sandra Sluberski. We're going to get into a wide-ranging conversation, but Dr. Sandra, welcome.
So happy to be here, Frank.
Oh my gosh. And you are in an incredible space right now. For those that are joining us, it's worth noting we are going to have a little bit of a show and tell opportunity here this morning. So there is going to be a chance for us to actually experience what Dr. Sandra has around her. So we will get into that. But before we do, Dr. Sandra, would you please you have a very extensive and unique background. And I wonder if you might offer to those watching now and those who watch in the future a little bit about your journey through sound, everything that you've kind of experienced.
Yeah. Um, as a kid, my only other sibling was a sister 11 years older than me. So I'm in first grade. She's a senior in high school. Once she graduated, she went off. So I was pretty much grew up as an only child. But I spent a lot of time with my parents' record collection. And we had a big cabinet stereo. So I listened to a lot of music. And curiously enough, they had a lot of light classical. So I got into that. Then,
Oh,
as I got into college, I ended up majoring in music, and I went to a small Christian college down in Florida. So they tended to emphasize the connection of music in a worship setting.
okay.
Once I left that, then I went for my master's and doctoral degrees at Florida State University's College of Music, and that was more world changing because that was a much broader spectrum. Plus, I'm working with many different styles. I'm working with other musicians, some of whom have gone on to have internationally renowned careers. Um,
Dr.
and
Sandra, can I interject
yeah,
briefly here? I feel curious to ask what goes into studying a doctor of music in vocal performance. What is that like?
okay. First of all, there's actually three different degrees for voice. You can do a PhD, which is research based, a DMA, which is performance based, and then you can do what I did, the DM, which is half and half.
Okay.
Because I love research, but I also, was out there for the performance. And what you end up doing is you study all of the Romance languages because a lot of the vocal repertoire is in French, Spanish, Italian, German, Latin, and then a little on the side, I did some things in Japanese, Hebrew, Norwegian, Russian, because you have to bring these pieces to life in the composer's intended language. For
Mhm.
instance, you wouldn't really want to take a song by the German composer Schubert and then sing it in English because, frankly, it just doesn't sound right.
Right.
And then, besides that, this all has to be memorized and presented in recitals or in concerts with full orchestra, sometimes even in operas in which you are in costume acting. So you're bringing another person's intended composition to life through yourself, making yourself pretty much like a clay jug. They pour that into you and then you pour it out for others. So, in a way, you keep a chain going.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
that was fascinating. Thank you for expanding a little bit. But I please continue with what you were saying before I interrupted.
No, no worries. I love your insights actually help me think about things differently. But after I finished my degrees, I ended up doing a lot of performing, mostly oratorio and classical recital, quite a bit of music theater, a little jazz, believe it or not. And
Mhm.
then a few years ago, simply because the voice ages, I backed away more from the classical performing. And you'll recall, Frank, about 4 years ago, we made our acquaintance because
Yeah.
I started contacting you about singing bowls. You invited me to become an Ohm Store ambassador. I ended up with a collection of 11 bowls from the Ohm Store. And for the past, oh gosh, easily 3.5 years, I've been teaching both in person and online kirtan sessions, teaching people how to chant in Sanskrit, Gurmukhi, English, other languages. And this past year, I've also started doing sound baths with the addition of a gong. And I've been teaching voice for about 42 years, all different styles. I tell my students the only things I don't really cover are rap and heavy metal because those are so hard on the voice. So,
Oh my
but
goodness.
but I was drawn to mantra almost as naturally as breathing. Back in the 80s, a friend of mine who was into Wicca, the earth-based shamanist Wicca, loaned me a book about Wiccan goddesses, and one of those goddesses that was depicted in the book was the Hindu goddess Sarasvati. The interesting thing about her imagery is that she holds a musical instrument called the veena. So there you have the element of instrumental music. She also holds in one hand a mala, a japa mala, which is basically prayer beads. As you do a mantra, you run the beads through your fingers and end up doing the mantra 108 times. And that cements it in your head so that your brain is now pretty much programmed with that mantra. And then in another hand, she holds a book. So she's associated with music, spiritual learning, and then also education. But the book also symbolizes self learning, or what some people call self realization. So you end up opening up the book of your own self, your heart and your mind, and it is world changing. You see a difference in how you approach problematic situations and even sometimes difficult people.
Yeah. Uh, yes. Immediately you just say things and, things surface in my mind and I'm like, oh yeah, I understand. I wanted to actually pick up a little thread that you talked about because
Hmm.
of you sharing how you gravitated to mantra. And I think mantra is understood. My guess would be at a surface level. Maybe even my understanding of mantra is solely at a surface level. Would you share as widely as you'd like what is happening when we are repeating or chanting a mantra? Why is this powerful? Why is this something that has persisted for thousands of years across many religious and spiritual disciplines? What's going on?
I can sum it up in 2 words: vibes, baby, vibes. Because those of you who are listening in, if you've studied anything about physics or even ecology, you know that everything that exists has an atomic makeup, and so atoms are always in vibrational movement. You got your protons, electrons, and neutrons. Everything's moving. So there's always a vibration. Just because you can't hear it doesn't mean it's not vibrating. If I pick up a rock, that rock is vibrating in its molecules. It looks like a rock because its vibrations are different from my hand, which holds the rock. So the vibrations that we make with our little vocal cords tucked down here in our larynx, our voice box, can actually have an effect on ourselves physically and mentally. For instance, the one syllable om, and here that syllable is on this little object right here, om, single syllable, considered to be the most perfect thing that the human voice can utter. And it's even on the wall behind me in my little decal here. It's a way of using vowels and then bringing the lips together to form a vibrational letter M that helps to draw the focus inward. And when you do that, especially with the eyes closed or just gaze a little softened, you begin to lower your heart rate. Not to the point where you're going to faint, don't worry about that, but it lowers it so that you feel calmer. And when you feel calmer, your breath rate calms, your heart rate calms, your blood vessels deconstrict, because when you get upset and your heart starts racing from anger or fear or sadness, your blood vessels constrict. And that is the cause of a lot of problems, such as high blood pressure, hypertension. Stress related illnesses are a very big part of our 21st century lives. The very best thing we can do the next time we're stuck in a traffic jam is to start chanting Om, preferably with the window down so the guy in the car next to you goes, "What?" and might pick it up. But it will make a difference. You'll be a lot less likely to hit that horn or use specific hand gestures to tell someone to move on. You'll simply go with the flow and you'll be a better person because then you're not shooting out negative vibes. Everything that you say or think actually changes the vibration of your body. And this is not metaphysical woo woo, this is actually quantum physics at work. Ask any physicist.
Thoughts have physical vibration.
Absolutely. They really, really do. This has been proven clinically, so this is not some crazy claim just to bring attention to myself. This is verifiable in a clinical setting.
What is it about Ohm that makes it the most perfect sound? Like if we could dig in and like geek out a little bit, like what is it about it?
It has four parts. Excuse me. You've got ah, ooh, the lips coming together in M, and then you have the silence after that so that you breathe and get ready for the next one. And that's what part of the symbol for Om is. I'm going to move this a little bit closer. You'll notice that on top of the symbol, there's a tiny dot above
Yeah.
the curved line. That dot is the bindi, and that signifies that moment of silence in which you've made the vibrations, you've ceased to vocalize, but the vibrations still keep going. And in India, when attendees go to concerts of classical Indian music, they do not applaud after the pieces of music because to applaud would break up the sonic vibrations which are still ringing around the room after the singers and instruments have finished. They wave their hands like this, much like the deaf community applauds by using
Yeah.
this. So that way the vibrations are not interfered with and the people in the room are able to still benefit from what's been presented.
Oh, that's real. Wow.
That is
I've learned a lot in the last 13 minutes already. Thank you, Dr.
I'll
Sandra.
send you my bill.
We are cooking. Please do. Okay, I want to ask you about kirtan, right? So,
Go.
well, those that are here maybe can help us. Who knows anything about kirtan? I don't really know much. I mean, in advance of this interview, I've read about it and heard a little bit. But how did you find yourself an enthusiastic practitioner?
Having had a full professional life as a vocalist and also as a vocal teacher and vocal coach, when I dove deeply into yoga and got my 200 and 300 hour training, and I'm currently now in ERYT 500 with Yoga Alliance, I wanted to find some way to tie in my yoga work with mantra. Now, every now and then I'd run across a teacher who might start or end class with Om, but hardly anybody did much more than that. And when I discovered that there's actually a very rich heritage of mantra that was not being tapped into very much, I contacted Mike Cohen, who is the leader of the Kirtan Leader Institute out in Colorado.
Okay.
Had several good talks with him and did some Kirtan leader training with him. I invested in a harmonium, which is the standard instrument used to lead most kirtan. And if you're wondering about the term itself, kirtan signifies a group of people which have come together specifically to chant praises to the divine. So kirtan encompasses several different types. You've got mantras which are called shlokas, mantras which are bhajans, mantras which are simply called mantras, and then you've got one syllable mantras like Om, which are called bij or seed syllables because you're planting that seed. So mantras take a lot of forms, and kirtan can be as simple as one person with one singing bowl and one other person singing along, or it can go into a full kirtan band, harmonium, guitars, tabla drums, everything, flutes, and thousands of people. The big kirtan artists that perhaps your audience might have heard of would be people like Sanatam Kaur, who
Hmm.
travels internationally. Also, Krishna Das, who is a kirtan artist who's been nominated for Grammys. You might also be familiar with the American kirtan artist Girish. And just a few years ago, Girish actually published a book called Music and Mantras, The Yoga of Singing.
Amazing. Music and mantras, the yoga of
Music and
singing.
Mantras. Yeah. Girish's given name is Glenn Cruden, but he spent 5 years as a monk in a Hindu monastery in India, and he was given the spiritual name Girish, which means Lord of the Mountains, and it refers to Shiva.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
since that time transformed Glenn's life, then Shiva is the deity associated with transformation. So it was a very apt name, and that's how he goes by in the Kirtan community.
Wow. Well, we're going to get into that pile of books because no one can look at a pile of books without
Oh,
wondering what's going on in there and what can I put on my Amazon list and all sorts of things. But I wanted to
thank you.
actually ask you about something. So you said 4 years ago you began inquiring about singing bowls. I find that people's journey into singing bowls is always really an interesting story to share about why it happened, and particularly maybe if you share the arc of why singing bowls. Was there some kind of a triggering event or an inspiring event or moment, and how are you using them now?
Yes, I would sometimes when I would go into different what you think of as new age or metaphysical shops,
Yeah.
I'd go over to the singing bowl display, strike a few and listen to them. So what I would listen for would be the fundamental. When you strike any bell type instrument, large bowl, small bowl, you get a lower fundamental tone, and then you get something else called the overtones. These are the higher pitches that help to tune that fundamental. A piano tuner has to do the same thing, and that's why a piano tuner usually has tuning forks to help him find the fundamental, but also tune the overtone. I found that the fundamental actually physically and spiritually resonated right in the heart space, and that I could use that as the basis for choosing the tone on which I could begin a mantra. Then I started using a mantra at the end of the yoga classes I'd be teaching, and I would always try to tie in the meaning of that mantra with my classes. That's about when I also started taking my kirtan leader training. And then I found you and dropped a few coins on you. And man, I'm still doing it and I'm loving it to death because these are fantastic. But the beauty of singing bowls is that not only do they sound gorgeous, but they feel good in the hand. They're beautiful to look at. This is the ancient self bowl, which is engraved with a prayer both inside and out, and it has the symbol for Om engraved right in the bowl. And people want to come up and handle them. They say, "What is that? Can you tell me about that?" I have no hesitation about putting this in their hands, giving them the striker, and say, "Try it for yourself." I
Mm,
teach them how to rub the striker so the tone sustains. And then if I'm anywhere, say near a shop which sell these, I'll say, right over there, you can find them. Or better yet, I give them the code which you gave me a long time ago as an Ohm Store ambassador and say,
yeah.
if you go to Frank's shop online, this will get you 10% off. So I just try to keep that going and keep planting more seeds. I've found that mantras enhance any yoga class, even if it's just Om, but people are fascinated if I can teach them mantras which have several words, and then I teach them the meaning and the pronunciation so that now they have a takeaway that they can keep in their minds and in their ears. One of my favorites is 3 words long: Om Jyotir Aham. Om sort of tunes us in as, and then Jyotir has to do with consciousness, as in divine consciousness. Jyotir Aham, I am that consciousness. So the translation is, I am the light of pure consciousness.
Mm,
And that's a very self affirming thing to do because in the 21st century, what I find is that people are very insecure. We're bombarded almost 24 hours a day from news sources which are unceasing in their sharing of bad news.
yeah.
And so it dampens our own human vibration. We're not as apt to be positive in how we think not only of others but ourselves. And
Yeah.
these mantras are something that we can use as a little kind of a sonic sanctuary. And so that you
Oh.
can, if you chant very Om Jyotiraham, Om Jyotiraham, over and over, maybe even with a mala, chanting it 108 times, you entrain your body into the vibration of that mantra. And you don't even have to use the same pitches. Make up your own pitches. Do
Mm.
what's comfortable for your voice.
Is it important to understand the direct translations when we're using mantra, or is it just something about the physiological way that the words cause us to shape our mouth and draw air that's doing the magic?
I would say both, but I think if you want to really do justice to mantra, and most everyone who is interested in sound school and mantra would want to do justice to it, you need to know what you're saying. And here's the cool part. Most of the mantras that we think of as mantras are in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is, according to linguists and those who are linguists and historians, it's pretty much the oldest language on the planet, or at least the
Mm.
oldest documented language. It used to be a language reserved specifically for the priesthood or those who were the leaders of worship and ritual. It was not the everyday spoken language.
Okay.
So that language was chosen and formed specifically because every single syllable had a specific vibration. And when you link them together in specific Sanskrit words, those vibrations have a particular application. Some speak to the heart center or the heart chakra, others to the root chakra, others to the third eye or crown. So it's almost like applying sonic medicine directly to the area of the body that most needs to be affected.
Oh, oh, I understand now.
Heavy, heavy.
Oh, wow. I oh my gosh. Okay, so I have a lot of questions. I'm so
Shoot.
excited to talk. Okay, so I find that I keep wanting to go back to little things that we talked about and ask you to expand on them. So, what I would love for you to share with us is maybe an exploration and an understanding of intention from the perspective of what we talked about earlier, which is that thoughts have a physical vibration. And maybe you can just talk about like intention ultimately being a thought that you're carrying into an experience.
Mhm.
Being a physical vibration, but I wonder if maybe I don't know that I'd had ever connected that idea where intention is actually uh exists in the physical universe when we're thinking of it in this way. And I wonder if you might share a bit about intention in anything that you do, but maybe particularly in your practice, either alone or with others.
Sure. Well, first of all, when you think of thought as having an ability to have an effect in the world, we all think that our thoughts are very private. If you walk through any town, village, or city, you're going to come across churches, mosques, synagogues, various meeting houses of different people who gather together to worship how they choose to worship. Right there, you see thought having a very physical manifestation because this group of people wanted to come together to sort of, I want to say, wrap thoughts around them of devotion to whatever spiritual path that they are dedicating themselves to. Notice I'm wording this very carefully because I don't want to show any favoritism. But on a much more personal level, if I sit here very calmly with my back straight and I am thinking about someone perhaps that I have trouble getting along with, maybe a coworker, a neighbor, maybe even a family member. And on any given day, I could say, ah, rah, 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 rah. But what if I sat here and took long, deep breaths and calmly thought about, I am going to send positive, accepting thoughts their way because they might be difficult because they're going through something I may not understand. They might be difficult because they feel left out and misunderstood and that nobody wants to connect with them. They might be difficult because they have never been shown love in any form, whether it's a handshake, a wave, a friendly hello. And as I sit here and think these thoughts, this is going to calm down any stress that I might carry within my physical self that I may have about that person. Now, we know that our heart is a biomechanical electrical pump. That's a medical fact. The heart emits an electrical field. So when we speak about a person having an aura, that aura is actually a biomagnetic field around the body, usually anywhere from 4 to 7 inches from the surface of the skin, that is generated by the heart. So when you sense someone's aura, that's what you're sensing. We can change that aura by thinking or chanting positive, uplifting thoughts. Now, suppose I've got laryngitis and I can't chant, I can't make a sound. I can still change my aura because the power of my thoughts is a very real thing. And guess what else in the body is electrical? My brain. The synapses between the neurons in the brain connect with small electrical pulsations. And so that means that I've got a very powerful electromagnetic field up here, right around my mind, which is generating these thoughts. As a side note, for those of you who are interested in art, that's where we get the idea of the golden halo around the head of
Oh,
saints and holy people, because it's part of the arc line or the power of our biomagnetic electrical field. Anyway, to get back to your question, if I can think these thoughts, then I'm going to lower my heart rate, I'll lower my breath rate, I'm going to, in a sense, brighten my electromagnetic field. And then the next time that I actually see that person, I can wave and say hi. They may not want to look at me, but they may actually pick up on a sense that something has changed about the way I interacted with them. They may not feel that I'm shielded or antagonistic toward them. They may feel, oh, she just was nice to me. Wow, that's kind of neat. And maybe next time they might make contact, or they might wave, or they might even say, how you doing? And maybe then I've broken down a barrier. And then perhaps they will take that energy and share it with someone else because they feel a little more connected. And so, again, I keep referring to links in a chain. I can be a solid link. I can link to the next person, and that person can then maybe even unwittingly continue to link positive energy. So, if we all did this together, or at least if more people did this together, it would change the vibration of the entire planet. And you might think, no, 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 there's billions of people and much land mass and ocean. But just think about it for a minute. If you get, let's say, 2,000 people in an arena venue for a rock concert, and people are grooving to that music, you can feel the energy of people enjoying that music. That's the same kind of vibe you get if you see several hundred people in a big kirtan gathering with a well known kirtan artist like Krishna Das or Girish. Now, imagine that all over the world we had groups like this. That energy of all these people could not stay contained in the room in which that's taking place. That will go out once people start leaving the room. They'll carry that energy with them. It's like what we talked about with the Om symbol. The
yeah.
moment of silence at the end is still filled with vibration.
Wow. This also, it makes me consider that things like gossiping about other people and complaining are more impactful than just little throwaway comments, that we mention offhand when we feel frustrated or angry.
It's true. Anyone who's ever had training as an actor knows that just the way that you tone your voice when you say one word can actually color another person's entire view of you as a person. And they'll judge you completely by the way you say one word. Let's just say you and I just logged on together. Frank and I say, nice hat. And you'll be going like, oh, she likes my hat. Or I can say, or I can say, nice hat, and you'll feel small because you'll feel that I dissed your sartorial choices. And by the way,
Right.
it is an excellent hat.
Thank you. I like your shirt, by the way.
I like your shirt. This is how far back we go.
Yes.
So, just the way that I can change my vocal tone on a word or a small phrase can make or break someone's day. It's true.
Ah, what's it like for you to have a daily practice? Because I'm really tapping in um, to what we're talking about here in terms of the power of being able to, I mean, to put it simply, to raise our own vibration. How are you raising your own vibration every day? Because we've talked about a lot of modalities, and I'm wondering how someone with such exposure and curiosity and mastery takes everything that you've known and experienced and puts it into a day that encompasses 24 hours, of which you're
Oh
sleeping
man.
for a third of it.
See, I'm lucky because my main career pastime, no, vocation is teaching voice. So I'm vocalizing for hours a day. and getting to work with the great music of masterful composers from the last, shall we say, 500 years and
Yeah.
currently. But when I'm doing mantra, I'm working with ancient prayers and intentions from thousands of years back. And for instance, today, I knew that we had this interview coming up. So in the shower, and you know that many people sing or hum in the shower,
Yeah.
I'm actually toning my voice in the shower. And by toning my voice, I choose a low pitch until I feel the frequency kind of locks in. And I go through the 7 energy centers of the body as I raise the pitch up. When I feel like I've toned in the 7 centers and activated them, then I start doing what I call octave swoops so that I'm moving in a circular, and again, a lot of this is internal, a circular sonic motion through all of my body centers and until I feel that I'm balanced. And this is something that I'll be going into in a lot more detail in one of the modules that I'll be doing for the sound school.
Oh, cool. I was going to ask you actually. So we're, of course, I hadn't mentioned it, but Dr. Sandra is going to be an instructor for upcoming Sound School, which our enrollment opens October 1st. And we are really, really lucky to have her. Would you talk about, you called it a circular sonic swoop?
Circular, yeah, a circular octave swoop. So,
What does
and
that mean?
you don't, first of all, if you don't even know what an octave is, don't worry about it because you don't really need to be able to read music or understand music theory to do these sorts of things. You just have to be able to be willing to make a sound. And if you're not willing to do it in front of anyone else, then wait till everyone else has left your home. Or if you're in an apartment, do this in the shower during a time of day when maybe your neighbor won't be banging on the wall saying, shut up. There's, or wait till you get into your car or go out into a public space, something like
Mm.
that. Just anyway, what I do is I start low and go, ma. So I've covered what would be do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do,
Yeah.
and I bend the pitches to get up there and then I bend them to get back down, much like the shape of this gong. No beginning and no end, and I can keep that going. It's a pretty
Oh,
fascinating thing because the circle is not just limited to a shape that we see, it's also a shape that we have as an energy shape. Um, the chakras, which are the 7 energy centers of the body, and again,
yeah.
these are also verifiable. They're usually visualized in representations as circular areas of spinning energy, because for something to spin, it has to start at a starting point and then go in a circle and come back to that starting point. And that's why we have wheels that are round and not square or triangular. Because,
Yeah.
of course, I haven't seen your car, Frank. I don't know.
I've got you pick the one person that's got triangle wheels.
But it gives that sense of this motion's going to keep going. I'm going to keep rolling, and forward motion continues. Um, it keeps you looking ahead. You don't get bogged down and stuck in one place. And that's the beauty of having something to help you remember your repetitions when you do mantras. For instance, if you chant Om, you use this mala. You run one bead through your fingertips each time you chant it. By the time you get to the circle, which is all the way to the other side, you've done 108 representations. Why 108? Well, look at the 3 numerals that make it up. One is unity, standing alone. Okay. The 0 is that circle, no beginning and no end. And then the number 8, if you place the number 8 on its side, that's the universal symbol for infinity. And
Whoa.
so by the time you've chanted anything 108 times, it's part of your almost your DNA. Your muscle fibers are filled with the vibration, your brain is filled with the vibration, you've memorized it, it's there.
Whoa, Dr. Sandra. This is just like a small aside. I was raised Roman Catholic, but now I'm wondering, do you happen to know how many beads there are in a rosary?
There are 54 beads in a rosary.
Oh,
And
times
here's
two is 108.
times two. So chant your prayers on your rosary and then go backwards. Chant your prayers all the way around and you've done 108.
Whoa.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
this
that's
is
some
cool because
stuff.
everything is woven together. Sometimes we see the backside of the tapestry and we see this big tangle of threads, but then turn the tapestry over, you see the front and you see the beautiful image that's being woven. And the further that you go in life, I've experienced this myself and continue to do so even today. The further you go in life, which is a polite way of saying the older you get, you start to see that, yes, this makes sense. Everything that you've experienced or learned or developed a skill in is there for a reason. You're going to use it or you're about to use it.
Wow. Yes. Okay. That is really powerful.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I don't often have someone so well steeped in classical education that I get the opportunity to speak with. But this is like really, I posed that question in a way that was going to be like a big question, but you actually said you have the benefit of spending time listening, performing the best composers of the last 500 years.
Yeah.
The average person has almost no exposure to classical music, and it's so different from modern music that it can feel impossible to connect with.
Yeah.
So, would you share for us? Like classical music for dummies, and maybe who are some high vibe folks that we could expose ourselves to, just like go on Spotify or find some music who are some high vibe folks, classical music for dummies. How can we appreciate something that's so far out of the norm from popular music that we may have uh that might have been the only thing we
Mhm.
listened to our whole life, and like what's going on in classical music? Like, what are we actually experiencing there?
Well, a student asked me a long time ago, and I really had to think about my answer. She asked me, if you were marooned on a desert island, what two pieces of music or what two works of music would you have with you? And if you have to think about that, because what would you
Yeah.
take? So that was before I got into this study of mantras and sound healing. And eventually I was able to answer I would take the opera Mozart's Marriage of Figaro, and I would also take the B minor Mass of Johann Sebastian Bach. And I chose those because Mozart is coming from the 18th century. It was a period of enlightenment, and his opera is filled with bright, I almost want to say champagne bubbly music. It's a class consciousness comedy with just a few serious moments in it. It's sort of about the servant getting the better of the people that they work for.
Okay.
So, and at the time, it was considered to be, oh, the servants are never smarter than their masters. Well, yeah, they always have been, okay? And it leaves you feeling effervescent. I chose Bach's B minor Mass because Bach wrote tons of music. I mean, here's a guy sitting at home raising 21 kids. You got to figure he knows a little something about introspection and patience. So, and he is more yeah, born in the 17th century, died in the 18th century. But he was extremely tuned into spirituality. He was Lutheran all his life, a church musician all his life, and grossly underpaid all his life. If you ever read any of his letters, they're usually letters to the different church councils complaining because he's not getting paid enough. So I get it. I've been there, man.
Okay.
But he wrote the most elevating spiritual music in both Latin and in German, and even a few cantatas in Italian that take the human voice in the form of a chorus, four-part chorus, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, combining it in such incredible ways that it can bring tears to your eyes. It can give you hope. It can lift you out of a dark place. You may not even understand the language that's being sung, but the music itself reaches in on a very vibrational level and lifts you up. And those two gigantic pieces of music really have made an impact in my life. Now, do I listen to them on a daily basis? No. Um, my husband is the recording engineer for our local orchestra. I live near Rochester, New York. So several times a year, he's there recording for broadcast. So I get to hear brand new compositions which have been commissioned and are being premiered just there. And then I get to hear these works that go back spanning 5 centuries. And there's always something about each one that leaps out and says, hey, pay attention. I may not necessarily like all of them, but they all have something to offer. So, doesn't that sound like our relationship with each other in this world? I may not like all the people that I'm around, but everybody's got something to offer, even if, as one teacher taught me, it's an example of how you don't want to live your life. Yeah, so you can still learn from these other folks, but mostly people have something good to offer. And if you just give them a chance, like a piece of music, it'll change your life.
Have you always been so kind and upbeat and positive?
Oh, hell no. No, I have not. And I've learned the hard way because my natural proclivity is to be, oh, I hate to say this, a little headstrong. My dad used to say, you it's obvious you're a stubborn German because I come from a German type family. And you're stubborn, headstrong, my way or the highway. And oh, I had to learn the hard way. Some people in my life have been hurt because I would say something off the cuff and it was unkind, and I don't want to live life that way. So certainly getting into yoga and then into mantra has made me very, very aware that my words and the vibration of my expression can make or break someone's day. And you know that we've all experienced it. Everyone
Yeah,
who's tuning in today has experienced it. If you walk up to the cashier at the grocery store because you're picking up a sandwich for lunch, if
yeah.
they're in a good mood, it can just really make you feel good. But if they're in a bad mood, you almost lose your appetite.
Yeah, it's really incredible like how we impact one another. I was at the grocery store yesterday and there was like I thought like a mean looking guy in a cowboy hat, and he was like I was looked at him, I was like, "Oh, that's like a mean looking guy." And then I walked past him and he like looked up at me and smiled and was like, "Hey." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And then I thought about that the whole way home. I just felt so good that he just smiled at me. It was crazy.
That is so weird, Frank, because I was at the grocery store last night at the coffee dispenser, and a woman walked by pushing a cart, older woman, and she said, "Honey, I just want to say the shoes you're wearing are adorable." And then she walked on. And as I thought about it later, something just said to me, I don't think that was actually a human. I think that was an angel giving me a little bit of a boost. I wish I had run over and given her a hug and thanked her for what she said.
Oh, wow.
I
Yeah,
just
that I
had
mean,
that feeling.
it's so special, it's so powerful, when we really, like, recognize that and remember that, like, our such little things can transfer energy in remarkable ways that change the trajectory of our and someone else's day.
Exactly. Exactly.
I want to ask you some like more deep questions about experiences with sound. But before I do that, what are you listening to now when you're driving in your car? Because you mentioned you don't listen to those two like fundamental pieces of music every single day. When you're driving, what have you been listening to lately?
I commute into the city 4 days a week to teach voice at a music school. It's about a
Okay.
22-minute commute. I'm in my car, it's on the interstate, crazy drivers. Every single solitary day that I do that commute, I listen to the Japji Sahib, which is roughly about a 24-minute chanted prayer. It's in the language called Gurmukh, and it's associated with the Sikh spiritual path.
Mm,
It's a staple of Kundalini. I listened to it chanted by the kirtan artist called Niranjan Kaur.
okay.
Very beautiful, ethereal, angelic sound. I'm in the process of learning and memorizing it. It's like memorizing a long script for a play. But I listen to it not because I'm memorizing it, but because it keeps me soothed and calm. And when you're dealing with interstate traffic during rush hour, it's either that or heavy drugs. So
Yes.
I'm, you know. So I listen to Niranjan Kaur and I'm chanting along the bits that I know, or just loving the sound of her voice, even though many of the words I haven't heard yet. On the way home, because I generally have a pretty good day teaching voice, I mean, I'm so lucky. I get to work with music and people singing. On the way home, I generally listen to instrumental jazz or instrumental jazz fusion. Curiously enough, I don't listen to vocal music on the way back because I just want the sounds and the harmonies. The words engage a different part of my brain, but the part that wants to understand the lyrics. If I leave out the lyrics, kind of like chanting Om, then I'm
Yeah.
going to immerse myself in the vibrational frequencies, and those are going to leave me uplifted so that when I get out of the car at home, I don't want to tear my husband's head off. I'm going to greet him with a hug because I'm in a good
Uh,
mood.
so is there like, okay, so now I want to get your opinion on something,
Okay.
because songs are essentially like, song music melodic based mantra. And I remember like growing up, you'd hear like, well, your parents would tell you you don't want to listen to a particular type of music, and then you kind of just like discard that, like, that's just like older people trying to control me. And now I'm wondering, what is your idea that like it can be any like type of music, right? But
Yeah,
realistically, like the words that we are listening to, or maybe even the frequencies that we're listening to, could be programming us, with some, maybe let's just say, like disempowering ideas. Like how do you think about that?
definitely. Every song with lyrics is a recipe. So when you put in all the words, that's like adding your spices and your ingredients, and then add the music to it, and there you have the complete dish. What you eat is how your body is. So if
Yeah.
you eat good, healthy, whole foods, you're going to have a pretty good, healthy body. If you eat a lot of processed foods and junk food, you're going to have a body with problems because it's not getting the nutrition. And every type of music has something to offer. I mentioned earlier, I don't teach rap and I don't teach heavy metal. It's
Yeah.
just not something that I care to teach. But there are some heavy metal songs I like, and there's a lot of really good, uplifting rap songs. And some of the artists who are really good about getting the words out so you can understand them, you can get a lot out of it. Now, I will say that as a collective, rap has gotten a pretty bad name because there are a lot of rap artists whose lyrics are very much violent or sexually demeaning. And that, as more people listen to it, does tend to collectively pull down the vibratory, shall we say, existence level of the community that's listening to it. And also, certain frequencies, such as the very low booming bass that often some of us hear as certain cars might drive by, that's invasive and pretty disturbing to our eardrums and our inner ear. And bear in mind that on a physiological basis, the sounds which hit our eardrums as they vibrate through the inner ear are amplified in our brains. So that sound as music, sound as medicine is a viable field,
Yeah.
auditory therapy. But yes, uplifting words, uplifting songs, songs that make you feel good, they're actually going to improve your life and the life of your community around you.
What might be going on for someone if they're, I mean, obviously we have to take like a guess, but I'm just curious, what might be going on for someone if they feel like really resonant with heavy metal, for example, and not the uplifting kind, maybe
Okay.
the few that you mentioned, but like what is, like if it feels, what is, I really, I don't want to say anymore. I think maybe you have an idea of what I'm saying here. I'm just like curious, right? Like everyone is ultimately, I believe, acting in what they believe is their own best interests. So what is going on when it feels like it's in within someone's best interest that they're resonating, with music that is like harsh or heavy?
You actually mentioned it yourself just a few seconds ago, and that is if someone tells you don't listen to this kind of music, you know you're going to listen to it because someone told you
Right.
no. And
Yeah.
that's just especially when we're young, we're trying to define our own individualistic natures.
Huh.
And so being told you can't do it means I'm going to try it because you told me I couldn't. And obviously there's something good in it, so I'm going to check it out. Another part is that you're dealing with the human body and the human energy in that body. Many, and I would venture to say most people have energy in their body which is out of balance. And that's part of living in the 21st century. We're pretty much bombarded with a lot of bizarre frequencies, some of which come from, hate to say it, Frank, but from our computers, from yeah, our TVs,
Yeah.
our headphones, all of
I
all
only
of
use
this.
wired connections, Dr.
Thank you.
Sandra.
Thank
I,
you.
I, I do not use Bluetooth frequencies.
Thank you. And I'm married to an audio engineer who teaches his students on day one of their audio classes, trust your ears and take care of them. Because if you are bombarding yourself with loud, powerful sounds, whether it's earphones or listening to it sonically through the air, after a while, your ears will be compromised and you're going to lose what are called your upper partials, the upper tones, so that your hearing will be impaired. And then I know a young person hates to think about this, but as you get older, you'll find that your hearing's impaired and you'll be much more likely to require a hearing aid as you get into your mature years. I am in my mature years. That means I'm over 30. But I've taken care of my ears all my life. Loud sounds are they throw me off very badly. They
Yeah.
actually make my blood vessels constrict. My heart feels tight. I get a tight feeling in the gut. And it's the same thing that everyone feels in the fight or flight syndrome, part of
Yeah.
the parasympathetic nervous system. So when it's a loud bang or a loud thud, that immediately triggers danger, danger. And so I try to get away from it. Uh, Soothing, lighter sounds are better for me. However, I really enjoy a good rock concert, but I usually have to wear earplugs so that those heavy sounds and also the high, loud upper partials are not damaging my ears.
Oh, wow. I came to terms with this maybe 2 years ago. It's almost like a trope that people, what do you like doing? I love going to see live music. And
Yeah.
I never resonated with that. Like from the time that I started going to see live music, 16, 17, I did it because it was the thing that all of my friends said was the thing that we should do. And then I found that I would go there and I would feel like I can't wait until this is over. And it's only in the last couple of years that I kind of just realized I'm just really sensitive to like volume.
Yeah.
And so it's not that I don't enjoy music. Of course I do. It's that the venues that I was seeing music in felt so loud that I felt, I think, in that fight or flight mode. So I just never could actually connect with the idea of people going to see live music because it always felt like a painful experience to me that I was waiting for to be over.
Exactly. And think about a lot of the people who are listening in and tuning in today. A lot of them may not go to the big venue concerts, but they'll go to small clubs
Yeah.
or maybe even, bars because they want to hear a specific band or a specific singer. Invariably, a band will play far too loud for a small venue. And that's because the band has to be able to hear itself through its monitors. Well, they're also competing with the sounds of clinking glasses and conversation over at the bar, other people laughing and talking. And then the singer, if there's a singer with that band, has to hear themselves over the band, over the bar, over the patrons. And so everything just amplifies and gets louder until finally the people in the bar are moving outside because it's just too loud, or even worse, they stay in the bar and their hearing starts to degrade. And anyone who travels with a band as their sound engineer, they have to be really, really careful. Generally, most of the sound engineers will wear earplugs, and
Yeah.
those that don't are not going to have a career as sound engineers for too much longer because the ears do degrade.
Rudolph, have you heard of the book, The Inner Nature of Music and Experience of Tone by Rudolf Steiner? Do you have that around?
That would be this book.
I was I lived on a farm in northern Illinois for almost 2 years, and the lady who was mentoring my sweetheart and I in gardening was a big fan of Rudolf Steiner from the biodynamic farming side of
Yeah.
things. And I found this book maybe like a year and a half ago, and I was blown away. So for those listening in, Rudolf Steiner is like the biodynamic farming guy. If you've ever heard of that style of farming that is potentially known to be like really unique. Rudolf Steiner is the one who first wrote about it. He also wrote this book, The Inner Nature of Music. One of the most memorable things for me about the book was that Rudolf Steiner shares his idea that music is potentially the most impactful of all art forms because it is the only form of art that skips the human intellect and speaks directly to the soul.
Yes.
I just wanted to bring that particular idea up, Dr. Sandra, and see if you wanted to expand on your experience for that and why that might be the case.
I I believe all art forms touch the soul, but in different ways. For instance, visual art, painting, sculpture, architecture, landscaping, those are all visual art forms. You can admire them and they may give you a sense of pleasure. Dance is both a visual and a physical art form. It's visual if you're watching it, but it's physical if you are dancing. It involves the whole
Mm,
body. Music, if you're playing an instrument, let's say I'm holding a guitar and I'm playing it, I'm feeling the vibrations of the guitar through my body as I play it, and I can change whatever I'm playing. But if I use my voice, it's not really a visual medium. However, the vibration originates within me, where if I play an instrument like a guitar, the vibration originates outside of me. So it's the
mm,
only art form that originates within the human body and leaves lasting vibrations. You might make the argument that dance originates inside the human body. Okay, I'll give you that. But once you're done dancing, you pretty much have to say, all right, done with that, done with that. The vibrations of sound making are a completely different animal because you're entraining or aligning your molecular structure in your muscles, your tissues, ligaments, tendons, and bones with the vibration of whatever you've been singing or chanting. And that's why really fun songs get everybody going together. For instance, you'll recall, or maybe you don't, the Live Aid concert back in 1985.
I
Okay.
know of it.
Yeah. We are the world, we
Yeah.
are the children, raising funds for starving in Africa, at a time when it was desperate to do so. And the whole world got behind that song, and for a short while, you felt truly as if you were unified. That didn't mean that there weren't wars and conflicts going on. Of course, there are at any given moment around the world. But there was one song that just for a few moments pulled people together. So, in a way, it's going right along with Steiner's philosophy. That's a type of biosonic farming in itself because it was growing awareness and sympathy in the hearts of the listeners so that they would then take proactive stances to do something to alleviate the famines in Africa.
Wow. Yes. Okay. What is when people experience singing bowls or any type of modality that would be classified as sound healing or sound therapeutic, what are the sorts of things that you've seen? Like, I want to what I always aim to do when I'm speaking is to create an invitation or a welcome mat to someone who feels curious, but is, uh, for whatever reason, they have not, experienced this in a deep way yet. And so I love to ask people if they would share a little bit about experiences that either you or people that you've facilitated with. What are people experiencing when you are facilitating them with singing bowls, with gong, with percussion, with mantra. What is available during an experience like this?
What amazes them most about singing bowls is the fact that it's a bowl, but that it actually produces a musical tone. Because to most people, a bowl is something that you put something in food, water, stuff. So they're amazed to learn that this is actually a bell. It's a bell. And you and Nikki have written about that on your website. They're also amazed to learn that this is a very ancient form of art because, as you know very well, you source these from artisans in Nepal whose families go back for over 100 years, generations, and longer, forming these by hand, one at a time, hammering them out. So the really powerful singing bowls are the ones which are formed while the artisan is chanting. And believe it or not, those those who study metallurgy know that metal is subject to vibration. You might recall that bridges, when they're being built, are tested to make sure that earthquake vibrations will not cause them to break down. Um, I could go on and on about that, but the metal actually will pick up vibrational frequencies. The nice thing about the singing bowls, because you have the lower fundamental, and then the mic probably won't pick it up, the higher overtones or
Yeah.
partials, is that the lower fundamental tends to reach us in the lower part of the body, the gut, and the diaphragm, and the heart. The higher partials tend to reach us more in the brow and throughout all of our, well, we'll call it the unconscious mind, because we really use only a small portion of our mind for conscious controlled thought. The rest of the mind is processing things without our even being aware of it. um, this, and the deeper the bowl, for instance, this is the, I think this is the Saturn bowl, the biggest bowl. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I
Jupiter.
keep getting mixed up with Jupiter. This this big boy,
This big boy.
which is hard to hold. Now you heard me do this bowl, nice mid-range tone, but this one, this sort of evokes to most people gigantic church bells in
Yeah.
European cathedrals such as Notre Dame. Also, these vibrations sustain for a much longer period of time than the smaller bowls.
Yeah.
This bowl will go on for probably about 2.5 to 3 minutes if I don't interrupt it by touching it. And then if I use a larger piece like this
Yeah.
gong is really just a very flat version of a singing bowl. The edges are curved, it curves back. You could almost use it as a tray, but don't. When I strike the gong, then I get multiple frequencies which even surpass what the largest singing bowl could do, because you've got the center, the frequencies here in the inner circle, frequencies on the outer circle, and then frequencies from striking the edge. So this is the most complex of all struck or percussion instruments, because you have mixes of fundamentals and partials that no other percussion instrument can even begin to approach. Plus, due to the size of the gong, this will sustain for 4 minutes or longer.
Hmm.
And it will fill a room. The room that I'm in now is roughly about 20 by 20 with a high peaked roof.
Okay.
This resonates beautifully. If I were in, say, a sanctuary of a concert hall or a church or a synagogue, this would easily be heard by everyone in what I call the cheap seats, the back of the room.
Yeah.
So just as an example,
Whew.
you hear the low note from the strike, but then you hear an almost shimmering upper sound, which is
Yeah.
different from the low note. And if you put your head right in the middle of the gong a few inches and put your ear close, you'll hear multiple tones. This is part of the tuning system. And those of you who are familiar with how to tune pianos and guitars, you're familiar probably with a system called tempered tuning. You tune at the octave, then you hear an octave above it, you hear a fifth above that, a third above that, and you're hearing all of this. So the gong is used frequently in sound healing, not as much with mantras, but in sound healing and sound baths, because it resonates right down into the marrow of the bone. Kind of like standing in front of the speakers at a rock concert, you hear the vibration in your bones. That's what this does.
Would you, okay, so I recently started, we wrote an article about this maybe like 4 months ago, but I wonder if you could share with everyone kind of distinctions between the word harmonics and overtone. And my general understanding is that harmonics is like a predictable mathematical relationship in the way that the overtones are actually arranged, whereas overtones, things generated from things like singing bowls and gongs, are not predictable. And I wonder if you maybe like expand on really anything you'd want to talk about, why that makes these unique musical instruments, what that means when we're experiencing them versus experiencing instruments that have harmonic overtones that
Yeah.
are more mathematically predictable.
And there's your key word, mathematically predictable. Some people say, well, I'm going to major in music in college because I'm not good at math, so I can't be an engineer. Bad news, folks. Music is chock full of math. But it's not that you have to worry about, oh, fractions and algebra. It's knowing how the tunings are arranged according to these divisions we talked about earlier, octave, fifth, and third. These
Yeah.
are called intervals. Like the interval between doing one thing and doing another is a set space of time or distance. And same thing with music. If I hit this note, um, la, then if I want to go an interval of three above it, I go do, re, mi, one, two, three, la, la. That's the interval of a third. If I want to go five steps, do, re, mi, fa, so, five steps, do, so. So those are intervals. You can combine intervals to get harmonies, like which I can't obviously do right now because I don't have two voices. And harmonics then are going to be the vibrations of these different intervals working together. You hear this especially when you go to what's called a gamelan concert. And for those who aren't familiar with a gamelan, it's it's from Indonesia, usually from Indonesia and Malaysia down there in Southeast Asia. It's actually a lot of instruments which are playing together, but it's considered to be one instrument. And usually they are what we in the West think of as folk instruments, drums, percussion instruments, different things like that. But each gamelan is, well, actually, it's given a name. Every gamelan has its own name, and it's given a blessing, usually by a holy person or a sage in that area, to go out and do its work of spreading healing harmonics. Now, if we think about, let's see, what was your other term? Harmonics and what was the other one?
Overtones.
Overtones, right. Overtones are less predictable because a lot of that is going to be dependent on what space you're in. If you're in an open resonant space, such as, your standard, say, concert hall, you
Hmm.
usually have a big high ceiling. The
Yeah.
walls are generally plaster or some type of wood, and there's generally not a lot of thick pile carpet.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll get seats which have a little upholstery, but not a lot because all these things will dampen the sound. You want
Yeah.
the surfaces for the sound to bounce off of. And that's why if you go to a good concert hall and you hear, say, a big symphony play something like Beethoven or Mahler, you'll just be wrapped around with the sound because all of these overtones are playing around you. Now, look at the human voice. If I sing la and Frank sings la, you'll have no trouble telling us apart because we have different overtones to our voices. There's one obvious difference. Frank is a guy, so when he turned 14, he went from a this, he went down to here. And then I kind of stayed up here mostly. But if I sang with another female voice, roughly my same age and level of training, you'd still be able to say, oh, that's Sandra and that's so and so. Because those overtones put a fingerprint onto the sound, which can be easily identifiable. And that's why you can tell, let's say, the voice of Ella Fitzgerald in a jazz recording from the voice of Sarah Vaughan in a jazz recording. Or you can tell the voice from Adele as being very different from the voice of Lady Gaga, and you can tell them apart without even having to see them because Adele and Lady Gaga have different overtones to their voices. And it's a sonic fingerprint that makes no two voices alike. So you think your fingerprints are unique, so is this.
Hmm. Wow. Okay, that was a wonderful explanation. Thank you for that.
Water break.
Water break. Okay, so someone just asked just like a simple question about the gong. How is that 24 inches, Dr. Sandra?
This is actually 26 inches. And
26 inches.
the symbol here, which looks like a funky number four, is actually the astrological symbol for Jupiter. This is made by a company called Paiste, Paiste. They manufacture most of the gongs that are used in symphonies and also used by sound healers. So you can get gongs that are as wide as 72 inches across. Yeah, imagine hauling that in your Volkswagen. And you
Yeah.
can get gongs that are actually only about as big around as this little object right here. This is specifically chosen by me because Jupiter in Hindu and Vedic mythology, and I teach a lot of yoga mythology, Jupiter's name is Brihaspati. Brihaspati is the preceptor, or you could think of it as the teacher, the professor of the gods. So Jupiter is associated with learning. And I wanted this gong to be my teacher getting into sound healing, sound baths, and working with it sonically. So I specifically chose the Jupiter planetary gong, which Paiste made. And each of the planetary gongs, and they have them for Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, the Sun, the Moon, has specific sonic peculiarities, or I should say individualities. This one, for instance, is tuned to F sharp, tuned to F sharp. So they are tuned gongs. Does that mean that's the only note they make? No, because as a gong, you're going to have overtones and frequencies that are going to make all kinds of different sound combinations. But this one was the one that, I hate to sound trite, resonated with me.
Ah,
And I want to give you a little side note. Usually a person buys a gong stand when they buy the gong. I didn't. I bought the gong because my husband, when he's not being an audio engineer, is a recreational welder. He used half-inch
ah.
rebar, formed a huge circle around a form, and then actually welded this specifically for me as his contribution toward my work with sound baths. And that means more to me than any gong stand I could have bought.
That's awesome.
So
Um,
it's imbued with his frequencies of affection for me.
oh my gosh, Dr. Sandra, that's wonderful.
So suck on that.
Woo! That's amazing. That's amazing. Would you introduce people? I don't remember the name of it, but the instrument that looks like a jug to your left.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is a clay jug. It's called an udu, spells
Udu.
U-D-U. This one was made in Nigeria. It's actually based on the clay water jugs that you see. You've probably grown up seeing pictures in National Geographic of women carrying water jugs of
Oh
water.
yeah.
Except this has a hole in the side, and you might think, oh, is that to pour the water out of the side? No, this is specifically made to be an instrument. It's a percussion drum. The top is your standard jug top, but the hole on the side allows you to vary the pitch. And I use this sometimes in kirtan, not so much in sound baths, when I want to get a beat, if I'm doing a mantra that's a little more upbeat. So this hole allows me to go. You hear two very different pitches. If I quickly remove my hand, I get that bum bum. If I cup my hand over it and hold it, bum
Oh,
bum 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 bum. So I can actually pitch it. And then if I do the same to the top, bum 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 bum. If I use the ring on my finger here on the side, I can add a little.
oh, whoa.
And so I've got percussion and tone all in one.
Oh, that is so neat. Oh my
You
gosh.
can get this on Amazon. It's not that expensive.
Udu.
Udu, Udu,
Udu.
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 Kind of like
That's
you do you, Frank.
you do you. Yes. Okay, I like that. Let's do more show and tell to conclude here, Dr. Sandra.
Let me add one more thing.
Of
If you
course.
have some people who have flutes or
Yes.
wooden flutes, especially a Native American hand carved wooden flute is imbued with power because the carver is going to put their intentions into it. And since we know that thoughts can change things, a wooden flute has a very different sound from a metal flute because it's used usually for very personal reasons. This is actually a courtship flute. So the sounds are meant to evoke the sounds of birds in courtship. And
Oh,
this is carved with symbolizing figures symbolizing earth, the people and the animals, the creatures of the sky, and finally the heavens above.
would you maybe just like share with people the distinction between a Native American style flute and more traditional musical metal flute?
Sure, this is a simple hollow tube, really, with a slightly tapered ending. There are only 5 holes drilled in it. And so to vary the pitches, that's going to depend on how much you cover the holes with your fingertips. On a metal flute, you have keys, little keys which put little caps onto the flute. Plus, this flute is held straight out.
Yeah.
A metal flute is played holding out to the side, and you blow in from the side. The air then has to travel at an angle down the flute. You can do quite a bit more, shall we say, oh, pyrotechnics with a metal flute because it's more of a concert instrument. But this is going to speak to you more on a visceral level
Yeah.
because the sounds are very simple and straightforward and very much closer to natural sounds.
Laura, who's here with us now, is asking, where did that courtship flute come from?
This came from a New Age store in Tallahassee, Florida, which is curiously a center for quite a lot of powwows for the indigenous tribal peoples that live around that area. I'm lucky enough, way back in my great grandmother's line, to claim some Cherokee blood, um, which is just fantastic. And so I'm very proud of that part of my heritage. I've been very lucky in that way.
That's amazing.
Mm.
Okay, Laura, that's where it came from. Okay, Dr. Sandra,
Yes,
we
sir.
don't have time for all of the books, but maybe we luckily we already talked about Rudolf Steiner. What
Yes.
are some of this is like everyone loves book recommendations. So
Yes.
could you pick a top three that may be interesting
Oh, yeah.
that you'd like to recommend?
I absolutely can. My first one would be Sacred Sounds by Ted Andrews. Sacred Sounds. Love this book. It's published by Llewellyn. You see all kinds of tabs because I've done a lot of study and underlining. My second one would be Sound Healing for Beginners by Joshua Goldman and Alex Sims. Joshua Goldman is the son of Jonathan Goldman, who was a
Oh,
pioneer in the field of sound healing. So this is, if you want, sound healing for dummies or beginners, this is the one to go to. And
I
then,
was really impacted by Jonathan Goldman's
yes,
simple kind of like explanation of using humming.
yes,
That was my
yes.
first exposure to him, and it's so simple, but it's really like unique and transformational.
And because my life has been centered around the use of the human voice, my third recommendation, I'm going to cheat, Frank. I'm going to make two recommendations here. One is by Russell Paul, The Yoga of Sound, talking about chant and yoga. And then the
Yes.
second is by Thomas Ashley Farrand, Healing Mantras. So Thomas Ashley Farrand has written a number of books, but he has three which are specifically mantra collections: healing mantras, Shakti mantras, and chakra mantras. So I found that I use most often the healing mantras
Okay.
because in my work with kirtan, people need these mantras which mostly heal the heart.
Mm. We haven't talked about one book, which is not necessarily in the exact realm of what we're talking about, but it's a pretty great book called Taking Myths to the Mat. Would you share a little bit about that book?
And I didn't even bring that with me. How silly. Yes. So if you've got a copy, hold it up. Yeah.
I all of my books are at the house. My sound cave or sonic bunker has 0 books in it still.
Sonic Bunker. Yeah. 2 years ago, I was asked to create a 25-hour yoga course that would teach yoga teachers how to incorporate yoga mythology into their yoga classes. And it incorporates not just the stories, but also the use of mantras and symbology, like this statue of Saraswati. I called it Taking Myths to the Mat. And I also created a companion book for the course. It's 109 pages. It's available on Amazon as a paperback, as an ebook, and also as an audible book. Because in addition to all of my vocal work, I also narrate books for audio. So there are several people that I've narrated for. I'm on audible.com, but I narrated my own book. My husband was my audio engineer, so that was really exciting.
That works out.
And I'm really pleased to say that for 2 years, it's been nice and solid. It has helped a lot of people. And I love getting those stories of mythology out there because they're just inextricably woven into mantras. There is a mantra for every single figure in yoga mythology. Quite amazing.
That is amazing. Cindy, yes, I'm going to put a list of I'll put a list of the books that Dr. Sandra has mentioned in the chat. That way we've got them all captured. So Dr. Sandra, this has been an absolute enlightening and delightful conversation. I wonder if we might just close with you sharing a little bit about what you're going to be focusing on in your lessons in the Ohm Store Sound School.
I'll be doing three different 1 hour modules. One is, excuse me. One is going to have to do with toning the voice, with finding your own voice. And it's not from the standpoint of I got to get up on stage and give a concert. No, it's just getting comfortable with your voice. So a lot of it is going to be with what I'm teaching every day at the music school downtown. Breath support, aligning the body for good posture so that nothing physically gets in the way of you making a good humming or chanting sound. The next module that I'll be doing will be teaching you how to incorporate myths, not sorry, I'm thinking back, incorporate mantras into this work so that now you can start chanting perhaps in English is what you'll be comfortable with. We'll be covering that, but also in the ancient language of Sanskrit, which is very traditional. And I'll also be teaching you some chants in Gomukhi. And then the third module I'll be doing is going to be a little bit like what Frank and I talked about today, harmonics, overtones, a little bit more of, shall we say, the science or the mathematics of music. And you don't have to say, well, I'm going to skip that one. It's all math, because it won't be. I don't like to do anything without a touch of fun. So to make it dry, dull, and boring is something that you will never find as a goal in my life. I want it to be enjoyable, but also something that you can sink your teeth into.
Mm, right on. I can't imagine something that you doing not being fun.
Frank, how much time do we have left?
You know, and what would you like to talk about? I don't have anything for 38 minutes.
I wanted to mention to people that while we're looking at all of these different instruments, there's one that we haven't really done much with yet, and that's the idea of a tuning
Right.
fork.
Yeah.
So some of your folks might be familiar with the work of the author Eileen McCusick. She has a very popular book called Tuning the Human Biofield. And she now has her own institute on healing with vibrational sound therapy. So this is now being incorporated into sound healing and sound baths. I have here in front of me a set, a little hard to see. It's a set of 9 different tuning forks, each one tuned to a specific frequency. This one that I have out is tuned to 285 hertz. Those are the number of oscillations per period of time to produce a specific tone. This in my hand is actually a hockey puck. Why do I have a hockey puck? Because it's the perfect surface to strike a tuning fork and get it activated, vibrating without damaging the tuning fork or your hand. So when I strike this, I get a fundamental and a partial. These aren't really good for large groups of people. These are good if you're working one-on-one with, say, you as the sound healer, and then you have a client. So
Yeah.
I'll hold this close to the microphone. I'll strike the edge, and then as I hold it close to the mic, you hear a deeper, sweeter sound.
Yeah.
If I bring it away from the mic, you hear a much higher, almost ringing crystal sound.
Yeah.
But as you hold this to the ear, that 285 hertz resonates with the heart center. So this is a heart associated frequency. And even something like this is being used in the fields of music therapy. Some people call it expressive arts. It's also being used therapeutically to work with people who are in various levels of the autism spectrum, to calm them, to help them focus, but definitely used for stress relief. It it's useful in dealing with people who are dealing with physical illnesses because by lowering the stress levels, you also allow the body then to put its natural healing energy toward the problem area of the body, because then it's not dealing with high blood pressure and other stress related side effects such as constricted blood vessels.
Laura is particularly thrilled that we're taking a path down tuning forks,
Cool.
um, and tuning the human biofield. So let's like pursue this just a little bit more, Dr. Sandra, because honestly, here we don't often. I never really bring tuning forks into the conversation. I don't keep any in the sonic bunker. How are these distinct from some of the other types of musical instruments that we've talking about here in like traditional sound therapeutic settings like singing bowls and gongs and drums?
Well, let's back up just a real brief kind of bit of history. The original, shall we say, sound therapy instrument was the harp. Those of you
Hmm.
who are familiar with your Old Testament will recall that when King Saul, who was the first king of Israel, was going through some mental issues, uh, he would call in David, who later became King David. And David would be asked to play his psaltery, which was a type of small lap held harp, play the psaltery, and also to sing. And this is where we get the book of the Psalms from, because they were songs made up to sing with the psaltery. Um, yeah, pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So that was the first instance of auditory sonic healing. But now, as we move forward in time, anything that can produce some type of frequency, pitch that can be sustained, such as a bowl, a gong, a flute, this drum, or this tuning fork, can be used because all frequencies will associate themselves with some part of the body. If you're familiar with Chinese traditional medicine, you know that certain areas on the palm of the hand are associated with other parts of the body. For instance, if I have a headache, if I pinch the area between my thumb and forefinger in my palm, I can help alleviate the effects of a migraine headache because this is part of where the energy channels connect. Each of these different tuning forks sends its frequencies in and is specifically aligned with different areas of the body. So there are 9 tuning forks. I mentioned earlier that we have 7 energy centers, starting from the base of the spine going up to the crown. But there are some other systems actually say that we have 9 energy centers, that above the crown there's yet another energy center, and that at the heart space and between the heart and the throat there's yet another energy center here right across the clavicle bones. So these can be worked singly or in combinations, actually making harmonies. Harmonies are
Wow.
very healing.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Like lots of enthusiasm for tuning forks here.
Yeah,
I'm so
yeah.
glad that you brought us to this, Dr. Sandra.
And I was introduced to this by actually a student of mine in yoga who already had her Kundalini certification at the time. And she used tuning forks when she was leading kirtan. She led me to Eileen McCusick's book, which I got a copy of and just devoured. And then, boom, get those tuning forks. Let's start using them. There's
I
one
love it.
instrument I did not bring today because I didn't think that I really have room for it, but it's a harmonium.
Yeah.
And for those of you who might not know, a harmonium is a small portable pump organ. It weighs about 20 pounds. It's about the size of a carry-on suitcase for airline luggage. And it's kind of interesting. People think of it now as a traditional instrument of India. It's not really. It was brought to India during the time when the British colonialized India. And so India was under the rule of what was called the Raj, British colonialism. A small portable organ that British officers brought to their army encampments because they wanted a keyboard instrument so they could all sing together the songs that they knew and loved from England.
Hmm.
But it got incorporated into Indian music, into especially using it for kirtan and mantra. And now we have world renowned musicians like Ravi Shankar playing elaborate harmoniums, and people think it's an Indian instrument. So have at it.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Oh my gosh. Dr. Sandra, we could easily go on for several hours. This is
It's
so
fun.
special. Thank you so much.
So,
What would you like to share in closing? Because really what I would like you to just share in closing, if you anything that you feel called to about um this has been like your life's embrace
yeah.
through sound, and maybe you can just share anything about what it means to you.
Well, I think if I could share anything, and as I mentioned before, I wasn't always a calmer person, so it was a
Yeah.
journey to get here. And that is to realize that everyone else is just as significant, as purposeful as I perceive myself to be. The most important thing for anyone who is wanting to get into sound healing or mantra, or even using these just in your own personal practice, maybe no one else in the world will hear it except you, is you need to take your ego and put it outside the door. You'll never be able to eliminate your ego. It's part of your makeup. It's part of your psychological makeup, your id, the ego, and the superego. Those are the parts of you that make you you. But your ego is the part of you that wants to make you number one, the top dog, the big guy on top. The ego wants control and notoriety and fame. And you have to do this for the right reason, which is to simply raise up the hum of the world to a higher level of vibration. The world right now is bombarded with a lot of stuff that's not healthy. Bad news brings its own low frequencies. These jangle our nerves. They cause us to think and say and do things which we later regret, maybe if we bother to think about it.
Mhm.
So set the ego aside. Realize that if someone cuts you off in traffic, you don't need to give them an Italian hand gesture and hope that they go over a cliff. You just need to understand that maybe they need a little extra kindness, a little extra room, a little extra understanding. Because maybe someday someone gave you that little extra kindness or understanding, and it allowed you to calm yourself down so that you were able then to go on in a maybe lighter frame of mind. If that's all that it does for you, then it's still having a massive positive impact. And the whole point of sound healing is to have a positive impact because I'm not a leader in government. I'm not ever going to be the premier or the president or the chieftain of any large group of people, but I can make a difference where I live. And if I can make that difference with this, then those who are the recipients of it can take those vibrations with them, and perhaps they can keep making a difference. So if I can be the pebble that goes into the lake, then those ripples can keep spreading out even beyond my knowledge or beyond my influence. I want to be that. And I'd be happy to have that engraved on whatever they put over my head when I go.
It seems like it would be a very large tombstone
Well,
to
so
have all that engraved on it.
actually I'm going to get cremated, so just dust me around.
We'll just fly, like the planes that trail the big
Right.
streamers with messages on it.
Right, just find the nearest kirtan group and just throw me into the air and let everybody sing while the dust particles fly away. I'm good with that.
Yes. Okay.
On wings of song, Sulali Dore.
Kat says in the comments here, I wanted to just bring this up. Kat said that people like Dr. Sandra should be world leaders.
Oh, such a mistake because I don't know that I could trust my ego not to start influencing me. I have to kick that thing down every day. It's not easy to do. But Kat, bless you. Maybe you are the one who's supposed to be the world leaders, and maybe I was supposed to be here to nudge you in that direction.
Oh, what a perspective, Dr. Sandra. Thank you for that. Okay, well, this has been incredible. For those of us, or excuse me, for those of you that have joined us here in real time, thank you so much for taking
Yes.
this time to join us in real time. It's been incredible to have you. I so appreciate the interaction from those that are here with us because it feels like we're part of a big conversation where I'm just kind of the mouthpiece part of it from this side of things. So thank you, everyone. And of course, Dr. Sandra, thank you so much. Thank you for the energy, for the warmth, for the information, the wisdom, the
And the books.
insight,
And
the
the
book
books.
recommendations, the show and tell. What a time. Thank you so much, Dr. Sandra.
Can I make one more
Extra
recommendation?
book recommendation. No one will
This
no
one,
one will
James
resist.
D'Angelo, The Healing Power of the Human Voice.
Oh,
And this book, when it was first out, came with a CD. I just bought a used copy without the CD. You don't really need the CD for it, but if you're interested in mantras, chants, and seed sounds for health, this is a really excellent book.
oh, amazing. Dr. Sandra, thank you so much.
So
We
welcome.
will be seeing you, of course, in Sound School and everyone in the comments section here and that has been watching us again. Thank you so much. We will see you all very soon. And Dr. Sandra, thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank.
Bye, everyone. Okay.